Hey guys, this is Nivir and welcome to this video on how to exploit the population in 3-bet pots. So in the last video, we saw how to find our bet sizing on the flop in 3-bet pots in theory. And I think it was really important, that's why I made a whole video on that. But I think the most important is still the exploit. The spot we will be studying today is button against cutoff in 3-bet pots, 100 big blind deep. And the stats you can see here are from Mobius Poker, so definitely check out his YouTube channel and also his website. These stats are cutoff stats against button c-bet in 3-bet pots, and it will allow us to see where the cutoff makes the biggest mistake, depending on the sizing we use. First, let's talk about the 1/3 c-bets. So as you can see, the cutoff should check fold 40% of the time, and he only does check fold 37. So usually it means that you won't be able to see bets really wide because it just doesn't fold enough. But you still need to look at the check raise frequency, because if it check calls too much but doesn't check raise enough, then you can still see bet wide enough. And that's totally what's happening here. As you can see, it does check call 50% of the time instead of 42, so it calls 8% more, but it check raises 5% less, which means that every time we bet, it will check raise you 27% less often, which is crazy. It will allow you to realize your equity really easily. Now let's talk about the 50% c-bet on the flop. When we do use a 50% c-bet, our opponent will check fold 1% more than GTO, so he plays pretty close to GTO. They will call 48 instead of 41, so 7% more, and they check raise 11% instead of 18. So now they check raise close to 40% less, which is crazy. It's definitely a really big mistake and you need to take advantage of that. But this is where it gets interesting. When we do use a 70% flop c-bet, our opponent will check fold too much, 4% more, check call 6% more, but he will check raise like 9% less. So our opponent will check raise 54% less often. So every time we use a 70% flop c-bet, our opponent will check raise us 54% less often. Think about it, that's just crazy, right? You can c-bet everything, what's gonna happen. Either he calls and you see the turn and you can still apply pressure, you can realize your equity, he folds and you take down the pot. As you guys can see, the population does not play well in 3-bet pot out of position against any c-bet size. However, we can clearly see that they make even more mistakes against the big bet. Thanks to the last video on 3-bet pots, we already know which boards we should bet big on. So now let's try to node lock and see how we should deviate from GTO to exploit the population. Here we are on GTO Wizard, so most of the video will be on GTO Wizard because I'm just gonna show you how wide you can see bets and how much you can exploit your opponents. So here we have a 3-bet pot button against cutoff, then deuce rainbow. As you can see, this is GTO, by the way. This is at equilibrium. We can use a big size, 67%, for 90% of our range. So this is already a board where we can c-bet close to range. But most important thing always is to look at your opponent's strategy when we do use big c-bet. Our opponent should check raise really wide. He should overfold all the pocket pairs, which is not really intuitive, right? When you have pocket sixes on 10 deuce, you're thinking, oh, I have to call at least once. But you actually have to fold this kind of hands and check raise all the 2 overcards, even like king jack of spades, which doesn't even have the backdoor flush draw. And it definitely doesn't happen 24% of the time. So what's gonna happen is that I made him raise 7%, and I made him call a bit too much. As you can see, all the pocket pairs will call too much, and the random 2 overcards will not check raise enough, because nobody check raises. Even 7%, I think it's pretty optimistic if you play NL2, NL10, NL5, whatever you want. Even NL50, by the way. I don't think they will check raise 7% on this board. I think if they have a 10, like king 10, they will call most of the time. And as you can expect, we are gonna c-bet range on the flop. So again, if you don't have access to GTO Wizard AI, you just look at your opponent's reaction and just ask yourself, is my opponent gonna check raise jack 10 suited, queen 10 suited 100% of the time on 10 deuce deuce when we c-bet big in 3-bet pots? Is he gonna check raise close to full frequency or the 10x? No, it's never happening. Is he gonna check raise all the bluffs? No, it's not happening. Is he gonna float or check raise the pocket pairs? I think he will float too much, but it doesn't check raise enough. That's 100% true. You can increase the frequency here. You don't need the wizard AI to node lock. Now let's see on 8 deuce for rainbow. As you can see, we should see bet big, but only 50% of the time. Now again, let's look at the cutoff. Is he gonna check raise ace 10 suited? Nope. Pocket tens, I don't think so. Is he gonna check raise ace 5? I don't think. Is he gonna check raise pocket nines? Nope. He's just not gonna check raise enough. Is he gonna call king jack suited? Even king jack of spade. I'm not calling king jack of spade, to be honest. I would call all the backdoor flush, but not the king jack of spade. So I'm overfolding this spot definitely. So what's gonna happen? So he should fold only 40% of the time. I made him fold 5% more. And he should check raise 15. I made him check raise 8. And this is already pretty optimistic. He's not gonna check raise enough. And obviously, as you can expect, this is close to range. Same for the 9-7-3 rainbow. So when we do bet, our opponent again should check raise and check call 2 of the cards. He should check raise like pocket sixes. He should check raise like 8-9 suited. He should call, I don't know what he should call, like, yeah, king, queen. You get the idea, right? They're never gonna do that. So what I did is that I made him fold a bit, only 3%, and just check raise less, I think. Yeah, 9% less. So I think this is pretty good. So as you can see, they still do check call more often. But because they don't check raise enough, you can just always realize your equity. Let's say you had your king jack offsuit, and he's not gonna check raise enough his pocket sixes, because if he does check raise, you're gonna have to fold your king jack, obviously, and which means that he calls the pocket sixes instead of check raising, and turn is gonna be a 10, a jack, a king, a queen, an ace, and you can bet again, and he's gonna have to fold. And yeah, as you can expect, obviously, we now increase the frequency. I think it was 50 something, 57, and now it's close to 90%. So I would say on this kind of texture, just range bet 2/3 and start thinking about the game on the turn. On the flop, you don't even have to think about it. A lot of people ask me like, oh, how do you play so many hours? It's because I don't waste my energy on this kind of spot, because I know betting big for range works really well, and I don't have to think about the blockers. I just bet big, and then I start thinking on the turn. So that's what I said. Every time you see a texture where you should bet 2/3, you now know you can bet close to range on the flop. Now, what about the small c-bet flops? These first 3 flops are already high frequency c-bets. Even at equilibrium, you can just range bet on these flops, and it's not even a mistake against a strong opponent. Let's see on ace king deuce, for example. So 3-bet pot button against cutoff ace king deuce rainbow. As you can see, we should bet for small size at really high frequency. Now let's look at the cutoff's reaction. He should check raise 90% of the time. It's never happening. They're never gonna check raise the gut shots. They're never gonna check raise some ace x, some king x. What the fuck? Why are we check raising king 9 suited and ace jack suited? It's such a weird check raise, but it's just not happening. They're never gonna do it. So as you can expect, I made him under check raise, and now the button can c-bet range. Let's do one more example, and I think we're good. I will do the example with you. So jack 9 7 flush draw. I'm gonna just prevent the opponent from donking, just because it's gonna affect the sim later. So jack 9 7 flush draw, the cutoff checks. You can see that you should bet 40%. Okay, why not? At 72% of the time. Now let's look at opponent's reaction. He should check raise 21% of the time. Is he gonna overfold? I don't think he's gonna overfold. I don't think he's gonna overfold because it's only the pocket pairs. Otherwise, he always has a little something, right? Yes, maybe he should call some ace queen, which I think they're gonna fold too much. The ace queen off with the hearts. But otherwise, I don't think he's gonna overfold. So I'm not gonna make him overfold, but I'm just gonna make him under check raise. Are they gonna check raise some king queen, some 8-9 suited, 7-8? I don't think it's gonna happen. Ace-8 suited. I just don't think that's gonna happen. So let's not look that. So I'm not gonna make him overfold, just a check raise. And they're not gonna check raise enough, that's for sure. So 10% I think is good enough. And then we just node lock. So it's just like what we saw on the stats. They call too much, but they don't check raise enough. And now the button can range bet the flop. I didn't go through all the examples just because I think you get the idea, right? You just c-bet range on all flops here. It's just the easiest exploit of the game, right? You just range bet all the flops unless it's like 4, 5, 6 for sure. Then you just check high frequency. But when you have an advantage on a flop, you just range bet the flop. It doesn't matter if it's a small c-bet or a big c-bet flop, you just c-bet everything and it's gonna work really well. Now the next video will be on how to play the turn once you get called, because a lot of students ask me like, oh, they range bet the flop and then they just don't know how to play the turn and they feel like they're getting exploited because they just give up too many hands and stuff like that. So I'm gonna be showing you how you should play turns in 3-bet pots when you have exploited your opponent on the flop and range bet the flop. So yeah, definitely watch the next video as well. Bye bye guys.